There is a moment, you know it well, when you feel the pull to reach out one more time, to send one more message, to explain yourself one more time, to prove one more time that you are worthy of someone's attention. Stop. Right there, in that moment, you are losing. I have spent my life studying power, the cold, unspoken laws that govern how human beings truly relate to one another, not how we pretend they do. And there is one truth that appears again and again in the courts of French kings, in the seduction diaries of history's most magnetic figures, in boardrooms and bedrooms alike. The one who chases loses power. The one who is chased gains it. This is not cynicism, this is human nature. And human nature does not change because you wish it would. We do not want what is freely given. We do not value what constantly pursues us. The mind is built on contrast, on scarcity, on mystery, on the ache of almost. The moment you remove that ache by chasing, by over-explaining, by making yourself endlessly available, you kill the very thing that made you desirable in the first place. Today I am going to dismantle this instinct in you, the instinct to chase. I am going to show you why it destroys respect, why it repels the very people you are trying to hold on to, and I am going to give you the exact psychological reversal that flips the dynamic entirely, so that instead of running after people, you become the one they cannot stop thinking about. This is not a trick. It is a return to the oldest law of human attraction, and once you understand it, you will never chase again, because you will finally understand what real power looks like. Let us begin with an uncomfortable truth. Desire is not built on affection. Desire is built on tension. Human beings do not crave what is certain. They crave what is uncertain, what withholds itself slightly, what leaves a question unanswered. This is the architecture of longing, and it has nothing to do with how much someone likes you. It has everything to do with how your presence makes them feel secure or uncertain, owned or earned. When you chase someone, you collapse that tension instantly. You answer every question before it is asked. You remove all mystery, all air, all room for the other person's imagination to work. And the imagination, I must tell you, is the single most powerful organ of attraction. People do not fall for who you are. They fall for who they imagine you to be in the spaces you leave unfilled. Chase them and you fill every space. You leave nothing to imagine. You become fully known, fully available, fully understood, and therefore fully unremarkable. This is why the pursuer always seems to lose stature in the eyes of the pursued, even when the pursuer is objectively the more impressive person. I have studied countless cases throughout history where the more accomplished, more intelligent, more capable individual lost all standing the moment they began to beg for attention. Through calls, through messages, through visible anxiety. Status is not measured by your achievements. Status is measured moment to moment by your behavior in the room, and nothing signals low status faster than visible need. Consider the basic economics of value. Anything that is abundant, that is available without effort, loses its worth in the mind almost instantly. This is true of gold, of art, of time, and it is devastatingly true of people. The moment you make yourself infinitely available, always the first to text back, always the one initiating, always ready to drop everything, you have, without realizing it, priced yourself at zero. You have told the other person's unconscious mind, I require no effort. I will always be here. And the unconscious mind, cruel as it is, responds to that signal not with gratitude, but with a quiet, creeping disinterest. This is not because people are heartless. It is because human attention is a currency, and currency flows towards scarcity, never towards surplus. You have likely felt this yourself. The person who wanted you desperately, who called too often, who apologized too readily, who agreed with everything you said just to keep you close. Did that behavior draw you in? Or did something in you recoil, even as you could not articulate why? That recoil is not cruelty. It is instinct. It is the oldest law of value in operation. Now examine the opposite dynamic. Think of anyone who has ever captivated you, a mentor, a lover, a leader, a stranger at a party who barely spoke 10 words to you all night. What made them magnetic was not effort. It was restraint. They did not need you. They were complete without you. And it was precisely that completeness, that self-containment, that made you want to enter their world. You sensed that their attention was not owed to you, that it had to be earned, that it might be withdrawn as easily as it was given. And so you leaned in, you chased. This is the reversal I want you to understand at the deepest level. Pursuit is not proof of love, it is proof of imbalance. When one person chases and the other allows themselves to be chased, you do not have a romance or a friendship of equals. You have a hierarchy, and hierarchies once established are brutally difficult to reverse. The chaser becomes conditioned to chase further. The chased becomes conditioned to expect it. Each act of pursuit deepens the imbalance, training both parties into roles that calcify with time. I want you to notice something else, something darker. Chasing is rarely in truth about the other person at all. It is about your own anxiety. When you find yourself reaching out compulsively, explaining yourself repeatedly, seeking reassurance again and again, you are not pursuing connection. You are attempting to soothe your own uncertainty by controlling someone else's behavior. But control cannot be achieved through pursuit. It can only be achieved through the opposite, through the calm, grounded refusal to chase anything that does not come to you willingly. This is the great irony that took me years of study to fully grasp. The less you need someone, the more power you hold in the relationship, and paradoxically, the more that person tends to want you. Not because you tricked them, not because you played games, but because your lack of need signals a deeper truth, that you have value elsewhere, that your world does not revolve entirely around them, that you are, in the oldest sense of the word, a person of substance. Substance cannot be faked through pursuit. It can only be demonstrated through restraint. And restraint, I promise you, is the single most underrated form of power that exists between two human beings. There is a principle in the study of relationships that sociologists call the law of least interest. Though I would argue it is far older than any modern discipline, it is a law of nature itself, as old as courtship among any species that must choose a mate. The principle states simply that in any relationship, the person who cares less holds the power. Not the person who is wealthier, not the person who is more attractive, not the person who is kinder or more devoted. The person who needs the relationship less controls its terms. This should terrify you slightly, because it means that power is not distributed according to merit. It is distributed according to emotional exposure. The moment you reveal how much you need someone, through your words, your urgency, your willingness to sacrifice your dignity for their attention, you have handed them the terms of the relationship. From that point forward, they do not have to work for your affection, because they already possess it unconditionally. Why would anyone continue to invest effort into securing something they have already been guaranteed? This is precisely why so many people find themselves endlessly giving in relationships where they receive so little in return. It is not because they are unlovable. It is because they revealed far too early and far too completely the depth of their investment, and the other party, sensing no risk of loss, felt no urgency to reciprocate. Urgency, you must understand, is not created by declarations of love. It is created by the credible possibility of loss. Let me tell you something about how the mind calculates value, because this is essential to everything I am teaching you. Human beings do not evaluate what they have, they evaluate what they might lose. This is why people cling desperately to a partner the moment that partner shows signs of leaving, even if they were indifferent to that same partner just weeks before. Nothing about the partner changed. What changed was the credible threat of absence. Suddenly, the mind recalculates value based on scarcity rather than familiarity, and desire floods back in. This is not manipulation when I describe it to you. It is simply the mechanism by which value is perceived. And you can either understand this mechanism and use it with integrity, positioning yourself as a person of genuine independent value whose presence is never guaranteed, or you can remain ignorant of it, chasing after people who have long since stopped working for your attention, wondering why your devotion is met with indifference. Now, Here is where most people make their fatal error. They believe that the solution to being undervalued is to try harder, to give more, to explain more, to demonstrate their worth more explicitly. This is the exact opposite of what the moment requires. Explaining your worth is, in itself, an act of low status. Anyone who is truly valuable does not need to convince others of it. Their value is demonstrated through their behavior, their boundaries, and their willingness to walk away. The instant you find yourself building a case for why someone should want you, you have already lost the frame entirely. I want to draw your attention to how this plays out among the most powerful figures I have studied throughout history, statesmen, courtiers, seductive masters of their era. None of them argued for their own significance. They simply behaved as though their attention was an asset, limited, considered, and never wasted on those who had not earned it. Others, watching this behavior, instinctively concluded that such attention must be valuable, precisely because it was not handed out freely. This is not arrogance. It is calibration. It is understanding that your presence is a resource, and resources that are given away carelessly are, by definition, worthless. Contrast this with the person who has convinced themselves that generosity, endless availability, endless forgiveness, endless pursuit is the highest form of love. I understand the impulse. It feels virtuous to give without limit. But you must separate what feels virtuous from what actually functions in human psychology. Unlimited giving does not inspire gratitude in most people. It inspires a subtle, often unconscious contempt because it signals a lack of self-respect. We do not respect what does not respect itself. This is the hardest truth I will offer you in this script. The world does not reward those who love the most. It rewards those who value themselves enough that their love becomes something worth earning. This is not coldness. It is the foundation of any relationship built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. So how do you apply the law of least interest without becoming manipulative or cruel? You do not fake indifference. False indifference is easily detected and destroys trust the moment it is uncovered. Instead, you cultivate genuine independence. You build a life so full, so purposeful, so occupied with your own growth, that your interest in any single person becomes one part of a rich existence rather than the entirety of it. This is not a performance, it is a state of being, and it is the only sustainable way to hold power in any relationship because it does not depend on games, it depends on the truth of who you are becoming. There is an old observation repeated across centuries of writing on love and power, that absence sharpens affection while presence, when overused, dulls it. This is often misquoted as sentimental wisdom, but I want you to understand it as something far more precise, a mechanical fact about how human attention functions. The mind is not built to sustain constant focus on any single stimulus. This is simply neurological reality. Anything that is constantly present, constantly available, eventually fades into the background of awareness. This is called habituation, and it applies to pleasure, to beauty, to relationships, to nearly everything the mind encounters repeatedly. If you are always present, always accessible, always the first to reach out, you are training the other person's mind to habituate to you, to stop actively perceiving your value because their brain has filed you under constant, unchanging, already secured. Absence interrupts this process. When you withdraw, not out of spite, not as a manipulative game, but as a natural expression of a full self-directed life, you force the other person's mind to re-engage with the question of your value. Suddenly, you are not a fixture in the background. You are a variable, and variables demand attention in a way that constants never do. I want to be precise here because this principle is widely misunderstood and often abused. Withdrawal is not about punishing someone. It is not about disappearing to provoke anxiety, nor about playing calculated games of hot and cold to manufacture false chemistry. Those tactics eventually collapse under their own dishonesty, and any perceptive person will sense the manipulation and lose respect for you entirely. What I am describing is something deeper, the natural withdrawal that occurs when you are simply living a full life that does not orbit around any single person. Consider how this operates in practice. A person who has boundaries, who has ambitions consuming their time and energy, who has friendships and interests that exist entirely independent of any one relationship, will naturally have periods of reduced availability. This is not a strategy, it is the honest byproduct of having a rich internal world, and it is precisely this honest unavailability that creates the psychological effect I am describing. The other person does not feel punished. They feel the natural pull of scarcity generated not by manipulation, but by your genuine independence. This is the crucial distinction between manufactured absence and authentic absence. Manufactured absence is fragile. It requires constant performance, constant tracking of how long to wait before responding, constant calculation of how to appear busy. It is exhausting, and it inevitably reveals itself as artifice. Authentic absence requires nothing but the discipline of actually building a life so engaging that you do not have the compulsive urge to chase anyone in the first place. One is theater, the other is character. Let me tell you what happens in the mind of the person experiencing your authentic absence. In the vacuum you leave, their imagination begins to work. They begin to wonder what you are doing, who you are with, what is occupying your attention so completely that you are not thinking of them every moment. This wondering is not painful in the way rejection is painful. It is closer to fascination, the same fascination we feel toward anything partially hidden from us. And fascination sustained over time calcifies into something far more powerful than infatuation. Respect. Here is what most people get catastrophically wrong about relationships, romantic or otherwise. They believe constant reassurance builds security, and security builds love. In truth, excessive reassurance often breeds a quiet boredom because it removes all uncertainty, and uncertainty, held in careful measure, never to the point of true instability, is the very fuel of ongoing attraction. Long-term partnerships that remain vibrant across decades are rarely the ones where each partner is fused completely into the other's identity. They are the ones where each partner maintains a distinct self, distinct pursuits, distinct absences that force the other to continually re-earn and reappreciate their presence. I want you to internalize this concept. Your absence is not a void. It is a canvas onto which the other person projects their own imagination, their own longing, their own unanswered questions about you. The moment you fill that canvas completely through constant contact, constant explanation, constant proof of devotion, you destroy the very thing that made you compelling. This does not mean you become cold or unreachable to those who genuinely matter to you. It means you stop performing constant availability as a substitute for genuine connection. You show up fully when you show up present, engaged, undistracted, and then you return to your own life, your own work, your own growth, without anxiety about what happens in the space between. This rhythm, presence followed by authentic absence, is the oldest pattern in human attraction found in every culture, every era, every account of magnetic figures throughout history. It is not a trick you perform. It is a discipline you cultivate, rooted in one unshakable truth. Your life must be worth returning to on its own terms, with or without anyone else's participation. Everything I have described so far, the danger of pursuit, the law of least interest, the power of absence, depends entirely on one prerequisite that most people skip in their rush toward tactics. You cannot successfully stop chasing others until you have first stopped chasing their approval internally. Behavior is downstream of belief. If you do not believe you are enough without someone's validation, no amount of strategic withdrawal will save you, because your desperation will leak through every gesture, every tone of voice, every carefully worded message you send. This is the deepest layer of the teaching, and it is the one most people wish to skip because it requires real work rather than a clever trick. You must build what I call an internal locus of value, a sense of worth that is generated from within, from your own standards, your own growth, your own mastery of your craft and your character, rather than from external validation. Until this internal locus is established, you will always be, on some level, chasing, even when your outward behavior appears calm and detached. Consider why this matters so profoundly. A person who derives their sense of worth from another's attention is, psychologically speaking, in a position of dependency no different from an addiction. Every text message becomes a hit of validation. Every silence becomes a withdrawal symptom. This dependency is instantly perceptible to others, even if they cannot articulate why they sense it. Human beings are remarkably attuned to detecting need in others. It is an ancient survival mechanism, because in the earliest human societies, detecting who required something from you versus who required nothing determined how you allocated trust and resources. This instinct has not disappeared. It operates in every interaction you have, whether in romance, friendship, or business. So the real work, the work beneath the tactics, is this. You must build a life and an identity so occupied with meaningful pursuit, mastery of a skill, deep friendships, physical discipline, intellectual growth, creative work, that any single person's attention becomes a wonderful addition to your life rather than the missing piece that completes it. This is not a philosophical nicety. It is the actual mechanism that makes everything else in this script function. Without it, withdrawal becomes performance, boundaries become manipulation, and independence becomes an act you cannot sustain under pressure. I want to address something directly because I know many of you listening have been in situations that felt like exceptions to everything I am describing. Situations where you loved someone so intensely that restraint felt impossible, even shameful. I understand this. Intense feeling is not the enemy here. The enemy is unregulated feeling that is allowed to dictate immediate action without any filter of self-respect or strategic patience. You can feel enormous longing for someone and still choose not to act on every impulse of that longing. In fact, the ability to feel deeply while still exercising discipline is precisely what separates emotional maturity from emotional impulsivity. And it is emotional maturity, not emotional intensity, that people find magnetic over the long term. Let me give you a practical framework for building this internal foundation, because I do not want to leave you with philosophy alone. First, audit where your sense of daily worth actually comes from. Is it generated by your own accomplishments, a project completed, a skill practiced, a boundary honored, or is it generated reactively by whether someone responded to your message today? Be brutally honest here, because most people discover that far more of their self-worth is externally sourced than they would like to admit. Second, begin constructing what I call non-negotiable personal rituals, daily practices tied entirely to your own development, disconnected from any other person's participation or approval. This might be physical training, deep work on a craft, study, creative production, anything that generates evidence over time that you are becoming someone of increasing substance, regardless of who notices. This evidence becomes the raw material of authentic confidence, which cannot be faked and cannot be argued away by anyone else's behavior toward you. Third, practice what I call the pause before pursuit. In the exact moment you feel the urge to chase, to send the message, to seek the reassurance, to explain yourself again, install a mandatory pause, not to suppress the feeling, but to interrogate it. Ask yourself, is this coming from genuine desire to connect or from anxiety I am trying to soothe through someone else's response? This single habit, practiced consistently, will do more to break the chasing pattern than any external tactic I could teach you. Fourth, and this is essential, cultivate multiple sources of meaning in your life simultaneously. The single greatest predictor of who chases desperately is not personality, but concentration. When one person or one relationship holds the entirety of someone's emotional investment, chasing becomes almost inevitable, because the stakes of losing that connection feel catastrophic. Diversify your investment. Build friendships, purpose, physical vitality, and intellectual pursuit as parallel sources of fulfillment, so that no single relationship carries the crushing weight of being your only source of meaning. When you have built this internal foundation, something remarkable happens. You stop needing to perform detachment because detachment becomes your natural state. You are not withholding attention as a tactic. You simply have a full life that makes your attention a genuine gift rather than a desperate offering. And it is precisely this authenticity that others sense and respond to because it cannot be faked. And everyone on some unconscious level knows the difference. Now that you understand why chasing destroys value and how to build the internal foundation that makes authentic restraint possible, I want to teach you something more advanced: how to actively invite others into the role of pursuer, not through manipulation, but through the deliberate structuring of investment and reward. There is a principle well documented across the study of human psychology, sometimes called the effort justification effect. Human beings assign greater value to things they have worked for than to things given freely, even when the object itself is identical. This is why a garden you have tended yourself feels more precious than an identical garden purchased fully grown. This is why a friendship built slowly, through mutual effort, feels more durable than one formed instantly and without any investment from either side. Effort is not incidental to value. Effort creates value in the mind of the one who exerts it. This principle has enormous implications for how you conduct yourself in any relationship you wish to deepen. If you make yourself entirely available, entirely easy to acquire, without requiring any investment of time, attention, or effort from the other person, you rob them of the very mechanism by which they would come to value you. They have not earned you, and what is not earned is rarely cherished. This does not mean you should be artificially difficult or play cruel games of hard to get. Artificial difficulty is transparent and, once detected, destroys trust as thoroughly as excessive availability destroys desire. What I am describing instead is the practice of allowing natural friction to exist, declining to rearrange your entire schedule at the first request, allowing conversations to develop at a natural pace rather than escalating them artificially, requiring genuine curiosity and effort from the other person before you reveal deeper layers of yourself. Consider the psychological structure of any compelling story, any mystery, any pursuit that has ever captivated you. It is built on gradual revelation, small pieces of information disclosed over time, each one prompting further questions, further engagement. Human relationships that endure operate on the same architecture. If you reveal everything about yourself immediately, your full history, your full vulnerabilities, your full availability, you have collapsed the story into its final page before the other person has even opened the book. There is nothing left to discover, and discovery, I must remind you, is the engine of sustained fascination. Let me teach you a specific mechanism for inviting investment without ever appearing to withhold manipulatively. Ask for small things before offering large things. This may sound counterintuitive, particularly if you have been taught that generosity is the pathway to connection. But consider the psychological research on this exact phenomenon. When someone performs even a small favor for you, their brain unconsciously justifies that effort by increasing their positive feeling toward you, because the mind resists the discomfort of investing in someone it does not actually like. This is not manipulation when done honestly. It is simply allowing someone the natural opportunity to build affection through the very human mechanism of contribution. This is why relationships built through mutual small exchanges, favors, shared effort, gradual vulnerability offered in turn rather than all at once, tend to develop far deeper roots than relationships built through one party's excessive, one-directional generosity. When you do everything, give everything, offer everything without requiring anything in return, you deny the other person the chance to invest. And without investment, there is no ownership of the relationship in their mind. They remain a spectator to your effort rather than a participant in something mutual. I want to draw a sharp distinction here because I do not want you to mistake this teaching for coldness or transactional thinking. The goal is not to withhold generosity as a permanent stance. Generosity given at the right time, in the right measure, is one of the most powerful bonding forces that exists between people. The goal is sequencing. Allow investment to build gradually on both sides, rather than front-loading the entire relationship with your own effort while the other person contributes nothing. Balance, earned slowly, creates a foundation of mutual respect. Imbalance, offered instantly, creates a foundation of quiet resentment and eventual disinterest. There is one more dimension to this principle that deserves your full attention: the value of visible standards. When you hold clear standards about how you wish to be treated, about the pace at which trust is built, about the behaviors you will and will not accept, you signal to others that access to you is not unconditional. This is not arrogance, it is self-respect made visible. And self-respect, more than any other single quality, is what compels others to invest in earning your continued presence. Because they sense correctly that your presence is not guaranteed regardless of how they behave. Watch what happens when you begin operating this way, not as a tactic performed for effect, but as a genuine expression of self-worth. People who previously took your presence for granted begin, almost without realizing it, to make more effort. They reach out first, they ask more questions, they remember details you mentioned only once. This is not coincidence. It is the natural human response to encountering someone who requires investment rather than someone who is infinitely, unconditionally available. You have not manipulated them into this behavior. You have simply stopped removing their opportunity to genuinely want you. We have traveled through the mechanics of desire, the law of least interest, the power of authentic absence, the internal foundation that makes restraint sustainable, and the art of allowing others to earn your presence through their own investment. Now, I want to bring this to its ultimate conclusion, the transformation that occurs when all of these principles are no longer techniques you apply, but the natural expression of who you have become. There is a difference, and it is a crucial one, between performing the behaviors of a high-value person and actually becoming one. Performance is exhausting. It requires constant vigilance, constant calculation, constant fear of being discovered as inauthentic. Becoming, on the other hand, requires initial effort, but eventually settles into something effortless, a way of moving through the world that no longer requires conscious strategy, because it has become the honest expression of your character. This is the destination I want for you. Not a set of tricks to deploy when you feel yourself slipping into old patterns of chasing, but a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own worth, so complete that the impulse to chase simply stops arising in the first place. This is what I mean when I speak of becoming the prize rather than the pursuer. It is not a posture you adopt in the presence of others. It is a truth you carry with you into every room, whether anyone is watching or not. Let me describe what this actually looks like in daily life, because I do not want to leave you with abstraction. A person who has become the prize does not check their phone anxiously, waiting for a reply, not because they are suppressing the urge through willpower, but because their attention is genuinely occupied elsewhere, with their work, their growth, their own unfolding life. A person who has become the prize does not rehearse explanations for why someone should want them, because they have stopped believing that their worth requires external proof. A person who has become the prize responds to disrespect not with escalating pursuit, hoping to win back approval, but with quiet withdrawal, because they understand at a cellular level that their presence is valuable and should never be spent on those who do not recognize it. I want you to notice something about all the truly magnetic figures throughout history that I have studied across decades of research, the ones who drew others toward them without ever seeming to try. Without exception, their magnetism was rooted not in what they pursued, but in what they had built independent of anyone's approval. Their power, their art, their vision, their mastery. These things existed whether or not any particular person chose to engage with them. And it was precisely this independence that made engagement with them feel like an honor rather than an obligation. This is the final truth I want to leave you with, and I want you to sit with its full weight. Stopping the chase is not, in the end, a strategy for winning someone else's affection. It is a byproduct of finally winning your own. When you no longer require another person's validation to feel whole, you stop chasing not because you have learned a clever technique, but because chasing no longer makes sense to a person who already possesses internally everything they were once trying to extract from someone else. This shift changes everything about how you move through relationships. You stop entering interactions with a hidden agenda of extracting reassurance. You stop measuring your worth by response times, by frequency of contact, by whether someone chose you over some imagined alternative. You begin instead to simply be present, fully generously, without anxiety, because your sense of self no longer depends on the outcome of any single interaction. And here is the paradox that closes this entire teaching. It is precisely when you stop needing to be chosen that you become the one everyone wants to choose. Not through manipulation, not through games, but through the simple, undeniable magnetism of a person who has built a life so complete that their attention becomes a genuine gift rather than a desperate offering. I want you to leave this script with one clear directive, because I know how easily powerful ideas dissolve into mere entertainment if they are not translated into action. The next time you feel the pull to chase, to send the extra message, to explain yourself one more time, to prove your worth to someone who has not yet earned the privilege of receiving it, pause. Remember that pursuit signals scarcity of self, not abundance of love. Remember that your value is not increased by chasing, only diminished. Remember that the life you build for yourself, independent of anyone's participation, is the single greatest asset you possess in every relationship you will ever enter. Stop chasing. Not because you do not care, but because you have finally learned to care about yourself first. Build the kind of life, the kind of character, the kind of quiet, self-possessed strength that requires no chasing at all. Because it is precisely that strength, and nothing else, that makes people chase you.